Welcome to Going Deep. This is the RSP cast with Brandon Angelo. I'm Matt Waldman. Happy July, everybody. We hope that.
Happy July.
Yeah. So we've got some good stuff in store. Brandon and I are going to be discussing some training camp buzz that maybe we should regard with a little more skepticism, whether that's players or narratives or observations. Should we be concerned about Joe Mixon? And then players in the top 30, according to ADP, that maybe values concern us. Some thoughts on the Bears backfield. We're going to play kind of either or with some players, including running backs for the Bears, two rookie tight ends, the Ravens passing game, and then we'll kind of round it out talking about some players like the Buccaneers backfield, the Tennessee Titans receiving core, and then a late round rookie. We wonder if they're going to have an impact or not. So stay tuned with that. So starting off, Brandon, training camp buzz. What is it about training camp buzz, whether it's a player or a common narrative or the types of observations that we see in the media? What's something that you look at and go, yeah, we have to be far more skeptical about that than what people do get skeptical about? They get carried away and go, yep, moving him up my boards right now.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of it stems from, in terms of us being more skeptical, in terms of when we should be skeptical, is when we see like the rookie mini camp.
Yeah.
Right. Because let's say if you're a day 1, day 2 pick and you're essentially performing against the rest of your rookie class on your team that's not day 1, day 2 picks, you're going to look pretty good. So it really doesn't matter in terms of what you look like, role, any of that, until we get later in the game. In terms of like training camp, that's when that stuff starts to begin. When you can start actually running with the 1s and 2s, that's when some of that stuff begins to matter, right? Like that's when I'm really starting to pay attention to guys like Rashod Smith, right? Like that's a big one where we're like, okay, the Kansas City Chiefs backfield, it's kind of open-ended in terms of that secondary role. Linebackers aren't really scared of Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. Pacheco, that's really not his game. So there's a vacancy there. So that's for me, I'm kind of like all eyes on those guys that have vacancies in their room. Can they fill that role? How they're operating? What coaches are saying, like what beat reporters are saying. I'm not really paying much attention to rookie minicamp. Yes, I know Travis Hunter is going to look great in shorts and a t-shirt, right? Obviously, right? Like Cam Moore's going to throw the ball around the field. Easy observations. But once we start getting into more of the 11 on 11 type stuff, we get to kind of see what they're being tasked with. That's when it gets more interesting. I think being skeptical early of like the big buzzy plays, right? Because those are expected with especially your higher end guys, your really good surface level athletes will have those. But then when the shells come on, we get to kind of see if what kind of role they're tasked with, how they're doing with the playbook, and get a sense of what they're like against veterans.
Yeah, I love it. To me, a subset of that is the guy who's just getting open at will on vertical shots, like Dante Thornton. He could be a good player,
100%.
but like seriously, that's like Romeo Doubs' rookie year all over again. Of course, you're going to have a fast player look good in rookie minicamp, beating people with speed.
Right.
When you see them with shells, with veteran corners on top of them, who actually are going to play a little bit more. Some of them may still not even be playing fully. They don't want to get hurt. They're going to be a little more cautious. Even then, that's one aspect of the game. And what is the least targeted aspect of the passing game? The vertical shot. So, so even if I love Isaiah Nayor and George Kittle's talking him up right now, and I love, George Kittle from what I've seen and as a player, but, I tend to look at players And you watch him. We talk about this all the time. You watch him on NFL 100, and they're all like, "He's big, he's fast, he's strong," and that's the. I joke that's the analysis. I mean, like, and I'm like, okay, great. I'm looking. You know, when I see someone actually legitimately go, there's two things that happen when somebody legitimately gives like technique and concept analysis. That's more than. Look at what Ed Reed did to Peyton Manning by faking that out, which was still a version of look how fast he is, that he can do that. I mean, it's tricky, but like when we get more breakdowns that are more technical, that's when I'm like, the player who did that, I have more respect for now than I ever had before. If I didn't,
Right.
And the player they're talking about, I need to go check out if I haven't.
For sure. I think a lot of those guys, I mean, yeah, like there's a lot of flashes in the early parts of June, July. But like once we get like a couple weeks in here, yeah, like, Thornton's not going to be hosting the Raiders secondary every single day.
No.
Right? Like I remember it was Denzel Mims a while back when everybody was like, oh my gosh, he's going to be, an absolute superstar. Jalen Reagor made that huge play. And I remember I think it was training camp, but then it's like things happen with these guys. Injuries happen. Like you have to, be more objective in terms of what we're looking at. But I agree. That's a really good point about especially the vertical passing game and how it's diluted a lot when we get to training camp rather than rookie minicamp.
Yeah, and the other narrative that makes me laugh is you're going to see the running back in the slot. And I'm
I love that.
the LeQuint Allen one, which is like, to me, it's that, and it's like Rashod Smith, as much as we both like him, I'd say he kind of falls into that narrative a little bit when people look at him and go, oh, he catches a wheel route. And then you're like, I'm thinking back to Shane Vereen, like way back in the day, getting excited about him. But I think the thing is that, can the runner run between the tackles, and is he going to get the volume? And when you talk about Smith, you're talking about that substantive thing, which makes total sense, is that there's a potential opening there for that. But we're going to take LeQuint Allen, we're going to play him. He's going to get a key role in the passing game detached from the formation.
Yeah.
The way you define that, probably based on past history with any coach, key role most of the time is not Marshall Faulk or Brian Westbrook. Or even Kevin Faulk or Dion Lewis. It's more like one play a game and or two targets a game, and that's it. And the rest is window dressing.
Right. A key role is you are on the roster and you are playing 5% of snaps.
Yes.
Like that's literally what it could be. So like that's 100% because you look at a backfield like that in particular, you're 4 deep.
Yeah.
You have Tootin, Etienne, Bigsby. Like you have a lot of mouths there that are good. So it's like, yeah, you're not going to have a large touch share.
Oh yeah, and then there's these two other guys who play in the slot. De'Ami Brown, who's been like a training camp darling for 3 years straight. And then you have who catches vertical shots, and then they're like, yeah, we got to get him more involved. And then there's that pesky little dude from not so little dude from Penn State who actually has great rapport. Yeah, has great rapport with Trevor Lawrence and wins after the catch, is good in zone, contested player, and Parker Washington. So like you look at that and you go, yeah, key role. Okay, they all are going to have key roles probably to some varying extent. So I'm with you that. So what about concerns? Like the one that kind of piqued my interest is, and I think everybody will get the elephant out of the room here, is that yes, I am going to be looking for ways that Nick Chubb, there is some hope for him. Yeah, okay. We'll just get the elephant out in the room there. I'm rooting for him. I hope it happens. I'm trying to be realistic that I've tried to be realistic for a while that it probably ain't going to happen. But when I watched his film, I didn't see major differences yet. And then he's got a full second year. He's had a full year to kind of recover from that knee, even though he had the foot after that. But, I look at him and I think of like, a coach like, the Steelers coach Tomlin going, I didn't see anything different other than the offensive line was bad. And then you see him getting signed by the Texans, who have Joe Mixon, an excellent back, but Mixon had that foot injury back in December, ankle injury, and everything's supposed to be fine. Now he's in a boot. He's still in a boot since that time, and he should be ready within the first week of training camp. I hear a lot of should be ready by the first week of training camp, and then there's a percentage of those players who should have been ready who wind up on PUP.
Will be a couple more weeks, and a couple more weeks is a couple more weeks from now.
And then they're not even playing. Right. Christian McCaffrey last year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, with Mixon, it's interesting because basically whenever you're in a boot, it's one or two things. A, you're trying to protect the surgical site. Or B, there's been a stress-related injury, to lower limb, right? In this case, right? Ankle foot. For him, he had a high ankle sprain. Missed like 4 games, right? Came back, wasn't 100% right. What that probably tells me, and it hasn't been reported, he probably needed tightrope surgery afterwards. Like he probably needed surgery to repair the ligament, and to get close to 100% again. Does it concern me? Absolutely. This is gonna be 29-year-old running back who's still in a boot, who has likely just had surgery, and you're thinking he's gonna be a top 5, top 8, top 10 RB. I think this is gonna be a slow played recovery where you're ramping him up mid-late season and having a guy like that 100% healthy for a playoff push. They have guys that can contribute with, obviously, Nick Chubb. They have Damien Pierce. They just drafted Woody Marks. So regardless of how healthy Joe Mixon is and when that is, there are other guys that can take meat off of his plate.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for Mixon's longevity and his health, because he's not going to be 100% Joe Mixon week 1. It's just, if he had tightrope, if that's what it was, they've been really hush on why he's in the boot. They haven't came out and said it. That tells me it is a surgical thing. But regardless if it is or not, there's guys that can take some of that load from him, which is smart on their end. You have your star running back, in a sense, who's almost 30 years old. You can have some of those guys take some of those touches, take some pressure off him. But yeah, I mean, if I'm in fantasy, he is firmly on my do not draft list. I mean, this is, like I said, near 30-year-old running back coming off a more serious injury than we probably thought. He probably played through a lot of that high ankle sprain, because 4 games come back is not a lot. I mean, that's a 6 to 8 week injury, right? So that's the thing. You rush back, you need surgery after the season to properly stabilize ligament. So that's kind of the issue. It's, you might have done more harm than good. It's kind of like Dave Montgomery in Detroit too, in a sense, where you come back from that knee in the playoffs, good, but what does that mean for the rest of your career, right? Like that's kind of the issue you're looking at with guys like that are kind of on that RB cliff in terms of age, they say.
Yeah. When
you add injury on top of that, near 30 years old, that's tough to see the ceiling again from guys like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's fascinating because then the other side of the coin is a little birdie told me the other day, and I can't tell you what kind of birdie they are, honestly, because I'm not sure the frame of reference, but they told me that that they know an insider who happened to learn that Nick Chubb ran 23 miles per hour in his workout this spring. Now, it's t-shirt and shorts. It's in a straight line. And we've already talked about in our very first episode together about the nature of measuring times and how much variation there actually is. But if we know that Nick Chubb is, at his height, a freakish athlete, the the fact that he's probably even within 20 miles an hour, even if you were to downgrade that, is still very good.
No, 100%. I mean, that's fantastic. At that age with all the injuries, yeah, it's fantastic. But that's kind of like where he's at after the injuries. Like he's had time to recover. And that's going to be interesting because how close is he?
Right.
Is 90% Nick Chubb better than 65% Joe Mixon? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's kind of where I'm like, well, like, why would I take Joe Mixon at his ADP
when you can get Nick Chubb in the end of the 15th round?
Well, exactly. So that's kind of that's where I'm looking at it, where it's like they're going to try to probably protect their investment in Joe Mixon and give Nick Chubb a lot more of the work during the season. And then when the lights are on and things start to matter a bit more, then you start to see Joe Mixon get healthier, him start to garner more touches. But even so, like, this is going to be an interesting backfield to monitor because if they're both healthy, is it 60-40?
Right.
Is it, 55, 55-45? Like it could very well be close to an even split backfield because these are two, older runners, but they're both very talented still.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting spot.
Even last year, looking at the stats, if you were to say, well, let's say Nick Chubb was healthy enough and ready to go. He didn't play well, and then you could look at the tape and you go, no, he wasn't so bad. You could actually look at it and go, the Cleveland Browns averaged a point margin difference of -10 from their offense and defense. And there were 17%. Only 17% of the time did defenses stack boxes, which was among the lowest in the league, which basically says, go ahead and run because you're running out clock and we're ahead. So please run the ball, and you can let Jerome Ford and and Pierre Strong just gash us for 5 yards per carry, because we know when you really need the yards is when you're sending Nick Chubb in or Donta Foreman in. And then we're going to stack the box against them. And even then, Nick Chubb was the only one that scored touchdowns out of those 4 backs. So you look at it from that perspective, you go, the back who was getting the most respect, the back who was getting the most leverage of big plays in moments where they knew they were going to run the ball and still win, was Nick Chubb coming back from his injury. And You're just like, okay, so maybe there's hope there. So, all right. Who's a player in the top 30 of ADP right now who you're just like, yeah, it's just a little too high for me right now. I don't think I can truck with that.
Say Tyreek Hill.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I think with Hill, like, here goes this, like, in a vacuum, like, Hill's going half a round before Devontae Adams. I'd rather have Devontae Adams.
Oh, yeah.
And with Tyreek Hill, you're 32 almost, right? Had the wrist injury. I don't think he can start catching until August. The Miami offense is going to be interesting to watch with Darren Waller added. I don't know how much that does for Hill. Probably not much. But I think we're going to start to see Jalen Waddle take a little bit more of the pie. Devon A-Chain is going to be one of the better pass-catching backs in the league. And I don't think Tyreek Hill is going to be 1,500-yard Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
And I just don't see Tua also staying on the field for 17.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the issue. It's like a guy like Tyreek Hill. Like, when he was at his peak, he was getting 10, 12 targets a game. Like, you're getting force-fed the ball. But I don't see that really happening in Miami this year. I think it's going to – hopefully their run game's better. Their offensive line's better. I think they're going to run the ball a lot more. They're going to take pressure off of Tua. And I don't think it's going to be a big vertical offense. And I think it's going to be one of those interesting items to monitor in terms of when does Waddle take over? Because this very well could be the year that Jalen Waddle steps up and is the one there. Tyreek Hill's not getting younger. He's coming off the wrist, but he's someone too. Like at his ADP, like I'm looking half round later and taking Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Like I think Tyreek Hill might be closer to Calvin Ridley than where he is currently sitting in his ADP.
I can see that. I definitely can see that. It makes total sense to me. It's a great point. I think I'm going to roll with Bucky Irving.
Okay, sure.
Just because, I mean, he had a fantastic year. 1,500 yards total on like 262 touches, and he had 8 touchdowns. But I'm just watching last year, as well as he ran, I also noticed that he was in those situations where defenses were expecting them to throw, in a lot of those high leverage situations. Kind of like the way DeAndre Swift gets yards.
Sure,
In
sure.
that regard, I think Irving's a better runner between the tackles than
100%.
DeAndre Swift
Agreed.
is, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think that he kind of benefited from like teams not knowing quite what to expect with how they were going to roll with him. And when they guessed Rashad White's our main bell cow, and then suddenly they kept putting Irving in those situations. And so you've got that, but there's a couple other parts of that I look at. I mean, that 5.4 yards per carry is hard to sustain year after year. I mean, Nick Chubb's about the only one that's done that in this era of football. So I'm not sure we're looking at that well. On top of that, Tristan Wirfs might start the preseason on PUP and might even bleed into for longer than that.
Yeah, he's likely going to miss I would say he misses the first few games.
Yeah, so he's going to be rounded in the form. Yeah, it's a huge blow. So passing down situations will be more difficult, which means that they don't convert as often, possibly, if they don't get the help they need at left tackle. And the run game, it'll suffer as well. So yeah, I'm worried about that. And then the third factor is they've got a 3-headed backfield here, I think. And I think that we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. But I think that there are legitimate drum beats that they would like to get their third string back, Sean Tucker, more involved into this offense.
Yeah, as they should.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, Tyreek Hill and Bucky Irving got an old guy and a young guy.
Yeah, for sure.
From that standpoint. So, all right, let's play a little either or. In Chicago, Kyle Monangai or Roschon Johnson? Who are you feeling right now? It's early, I know.
Roschon Johnson early in the year, Kyle Monangai as we get closer to playoff.
Okay.
I think it's hard because that be back in that Ben Johnson system, if it's similar to what we saw in Detroit, right, is really important. I think Roschon Johnson gets the opportunity because of the pass protection, right? That was his calling card coming out of Texas too.
Yeah.
And you're not going to give DeAndre Swift that, the high leverage, low red zone stuff. That's going to go to Roschon Johnson if he misses time or he underperforms. I think Kyle Monangai's going to be waiting. I think either of them. That's the thing is Monangai can take off of both those plates.
Yeah.
Because he's one of those interesting blends of those two guys. He's not as obviously fast as explosive as Swift, but he's tougher, better between the tackles, can make guys miss in space. Good in pass protection, right? Good in low red zone, so we can take some off Roschon Johnson's plate. So I would say early in the season, Roschon Johnson. As we get deeper on in the year, I think Kyle Monangai starts to really become more impactful.
I don't think I have anything better to add than that. I think that's probably the most reasonable take on that because all you could look at is that it's probably going to take some time for the team to trust Monangai as a pass protector just to see what he's doing in situations that you can't simulate in camp as well as you can simulate on the field. And that's the big thing about running back. Maybe the only point I would make is that the West Coast offensive coordinator / coaches in the NFL, the one thing they get right more often than anything else, in my opinion, is running backs. They tend to go, And what they get right about them is that, and Kyle Shanahan said it the best. He's like, I can't really tell you how well a running back's doing until I see him in live game action, because practice just doesn't give you enough.
No,
you know,
the bolts are flying. It's, how are they picking up in real time? Like, do they make adjustments? Like, how do they rebound after mistakes? Like, those are things we don't know. And so that's running back's a big trust position, right? It's like if the quarterback, play caller, head coach can't trust you, you're not going to play very much. I don't care how talented you are. We see it every year. Uber talented guys getting phased out of offenses. Like, you're telling me Zach Evans isn't more physically talented than Kyron Williams?
Right.
Absolutely. Every day of the week he is.
Yeah.
But Sean McVay can't trust him as far as he could throw him.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. You're not getting snaps in the NFL. And so that's kind of the biggest thing, is if you can prove to a staff that they can trust you in live game action, then you're going to start to pick up some snaps and see the field a bit more.
Yeah, it's a heavy processing position. And so that's the thing, is you've got to see them process information that's not a part of practice. So for sure. So all right.
Lovely.
2 rookies. Colston Loveland will stay in Chicago. Mason Taylor. Which one are you going with right now?
Oh, long term, definitely Loveland. I think short term, Mason Taylor has an interesting track early on. And one thing that I want to talk more about with Loveland, I don't think it's been touched on, he's coming off that AC joint dislocation, right?
Yeah.
6 month-ish recovery, fairly significant injury too. It's like a grade 3, so pretty significant. That likely means that he can't be contacted until training camp. When that happens, is a ramp-up period. So I don't think we're going to see Colston Loveland at 100% until maybe midway through this season.
Yeah.
Even so, if he's 100%, you have DJ Moore, who had 1,500 yards 2 years ago. Rome Odunze drafted him in the first round last year. Really promising rookie year despite the dysfunction that was the Chicago Bears. Cole Kmet had a really good year with Justin Fields. Luther Burden. DeAndre Swift. Those are a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of toys to play with for Ben Johnson. I don't think anyone really takes a step into being the alpha in that offense until later in the year and next year. I think this is going to be a huge feeling out process for Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, who he trusts, what he likes, when he likes it. I think next year we're going to see a lot of Loveland, Odunze, Burden. I think those are your big 3 in 2026. I don't think DJ Moore is going to fit in what Ben Johnson wants to do because he's not a big details guy as a player, right? He's closer to your Deebo Samuels of the world than Devontae Adams, if that makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is okay, but one is good when you scheme him. The other is good whenever you put him out. Right?
It's like the difference between like the type of cooking you see in the Bear, at a fine restaurant, and the kind of cooking you might see somewhere like at a soul food place in South Alabama. Where like it just depends on what grandma feels like putting in there. It's all gonna be good.
Absolutely.
It's all gonna,
that's the best analogy. It's all gonna be good.
It's all gonna be good, but you just don't know how grandma's feeling that day and where she's gonna be heavy-handed. And what she's feeling, what happened the night before that has her feeling like she wants more spice or less.
That's funny. No, yeah, 100%. I that's a great analogy, and I agree. I think that's kind of one of those things where it's like, DJ Moore is more, in my opinion, an extension of the run game than he is a focal point in your passing attack. I think it's always kind of been that way. And I think Ben Johnson knows that, which is why he drafted, in my opinion, a better version of him.
Yes.
Like the evolved version, if you're into Pokemon, up, right? Like, your Charizard versus like your Charmander or whatever it is, right? Like the more evolved version of him as a player and as a prospect. So, but I think that's going to be the interesting part, is just kind of watching that offense unfold. And you kind of go to Mason Taylor, like you kind of look what like that Lions offense look like, right? Because that's where Tanner Engstrom's their OC. Assuming that offense is going to look fairly similar from a I would say a schematic standpoint is they're going to look with Justin Fields, but also too they're going to do what Justin Fields does well. And one thing Justin Fields did really well was target Cole Kmet.
Yep.
2 years ago, Cole Kmet was tight end 5, right?
Yep.
Mason Taylor is, in my opinion, a little bit more talented than Cole Kmet is. So I think you could see Mason Taylor have a really, really strong start to the year where Colston Loveland might be just kind of ramping up for multiple reasons. But I think Colston Loveland might be a massive buy as we get through the first couple weeks, because I think there is going to be that ramp up period with Loveland, and I think some are expecting him to come into the Chicago Bears and light it up the first quarter of the season, when I think that's going to be a learning curve, but B, a ramp up process with the AC joint.
Yeah, I mean, and depending on, like you said, depending on the number of weeks you count, because I know, so when I use football guys, sometimes they count an 18-week season, but like I saw that Cole Kmet and Pat Freiermuth were both tight end 8 with Justin Fields throwing to them, and while Freiermuth caught 5 of his touchdowns with Russell Wilson, still there was he was still a starting tight end when Fields was in the game. So you just, and it's how he processes the field. You know that Fields is one of those guys that he can make a couple of reads. He's not a great manipulator, though. He's not a great full field, high end processor. But what he is really good at, that's keeping him in consideration because of his passing, is that he knows where that tight end is to check down.
Right. And that's a really big one, is he knows where the outlet is. Yeah. And he knows how long it will take to get there.
Yeah. And
that's the difference between Justin Fields having a home for the rest of his career and becoming Mitch Trubisky, a backup. Right. And so that's kind of the big thing. And that happens a lot, I would say, at the NFL level, is, if you can't find your outlet and don't know how long it takes to get there, you are in trouble. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he knows he's very good with the breadcrumbs. So that's good. That's good. So, all right. Speaking of people who've had long careers, there's DeAndre Hopkins. And then if we're going to look at this offense, it may not be a great assumption that Mark Andrews is still one of the primary guys in this offense, but we're going to roll with that just for the sake of the question. And if you want to get into more why he isn't, that will be fun and interesting. But I labeled it DeAndre Hopkins, Isaiah Likely, or Rashod Bateman. If you were to pick 2 out of those 3, who are the 2 you rolling with this season?
I'd say Bateman and Likely. I think Likely takes a step forward. I think the passing game will probably revolve around Zay Flowers and his capabilities. I think he's a unique player. Likely versus Andrews is going to be weird, because what does Andrews offer you at this age that's high end? And it's probably not much, right? It's just he's out there because he's consistent and he's a veteran and he's a Pro Bowler. But I think Likely offers you higher end capabilities. So I'm going definitely those 2. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is a good keep you honest X, in the sense of he will be able to be honestly another coach for Lamar on the field and kind of give him a sense of what the defense is doing, what's going on. He's seen it all, right? He knows how defensives are playing Zay and Isaiah and Mark and Rashod. So I think for him, for Hopkins, it's about winning a ring, right?
Yeah.
So he's going to be kind of the player coach in a way. I don't think he's going to be uber productive, but I think his role is going to be elevating those around him and being another set of eyes in the field.
I'm going to roll different with that. I think that's probably the reasonable.
I like it.
It's a reasonable. Yours is very reasonable. It's probably the most reasoned take of the 2 that we're going to have.
Sure.
But I'll go unreasonable with this, and I did last week, which is DeAndre Hopkins caught 75 balls for 1,057 yards and I think 5 touchdowns with rookie Will Levis 2 years ago. And then
Yeah.
and then he moved on mid-season last year and averaged a touchdown at a rate of 5% of his targets, which is his career average. Um, and if you converted that over, extrapolated his time with the Chiefs over to a full season, knowing that he didn't have a training camp with Patrick Mahomes, who was by far, if you ask me, the best quarterback he's ever played with.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
he would have gotten about 800 yards and 7 touchdowns. And so then I go look at the Ravens situation, and I'm a big Rashod Bateman fan, but I wonder, what if they kick him outside and let him stretch the field more and be more of the X, and they keep DeAndre Hopkins in as more of the big slot player in a lot more sets, and now you're like, what does that do to Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews?
Right.
And especially there's a thing about Lamar Jackson that I've observed over the years, as we've all been fans of him, but anybody who's been fans of him would recognize that when he tends to say something, he tends to mean it. Even when people think it's the most outlandish, crazy bullshit ever, like, oh, I'm going to negotiate my own contract. And he didn't make a fool out of himself by doing that. Or to some people, I'm actually a legitimate quarterback, And turns out, oh yeah, he's an MVP caliber quarterback who might have gotten a little robbed last year of his second one.
A lot of robbed.
Yeah, exactly. And then, oh, what else? Oh, I want another offensive coordinator. Please take the Greg Roman training wheels off of me. They were past due to be removed from my game about 3 years ago, if not longer. And he proceeds to have a career year with 8.8 yards per attempt. I mean, ridiculous. So when he says this spring, DeAndre Hopkins is unlike any receiver in this room, and unlike any receiver I've played before, I look forward to throwing a lot of touchdowns to him this year. That says to me that maybe 5% rate is like Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, Patrick Mahomes in the middle of the year, and Andy Reid's crazy funky at passing offense rate. What if it's like more like 8 to 10% of his targets as a slot receiver who's playing in the high red zone and getting and uncovering and winning contested scenarios?
Yeah.
And now you're looking at, maybe you're not getting like 1,000 yards out of him, but maybe you're getting 700 to 800 yards and 10 touchdowns, 8 to 10 touchdowns. And it's not something that, again, this is one of those that if I'm like fantasy analyst and someone says, as a fantasy analyst, is it a good idea to recommend the outlier on touchdowns? I'd say, oh, fuck no. You don't want to tell people that you're playing the guy because of his touchdowns. But there's always exceptions to the rule. And if I'm having fun with this, I look at this and go, before we wonder what if Mark Andrews gets hurt, or what if Isaiah Likely gets hurt, or what if Flowers or Bateman gets hurt, and they've got to use him more often, where you can play any position you want him to, even if it's not what it used to be. But
Sure.
in the slot, holy cow. Like, in the slot in the red zone, you might have if there's a Westbrook Akine type of player this year,
sure.
DeAndre Hopkins is an elevated version of that.
Could be.
With Lamar. So to me, again, if you can't get Nick Chubb at the end of the 15th round, maybe you look at DeAndre Hopkins because his upside without injury to other players might be 7 to 8 touchdowns. His upside with an injury could be 900 to 1,100 yards with double-digit touchdowns, and now you're looking at an Adam Thielen
Sure,
final
resurgence.
career resurgence statistically to end his career. So yeah,
Love that. No, that's pretty reasonable. I think the big thing is how much 11 are they going to run if he
Right.
does bump inside, right? Do
Yeah.
they like Mark Andrews enough right now
yeah,
to go 2 tight ends? Or do they say, you know what, DeAndre Hopkins gives the better chance with Likely on the field? Like that's our best set. That'll be interesting to monitor.
Yeah, or what if we do have Andrews and Likely in the red zone, but we take Rashod Bateman out or Zay Flowers out,
Sure.
and we have two tight ends on one side, two receivers on the other, and who's playing on the inside?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
Hopkins. And I honestly think I would be like, from the way that the receivers talk about him, they wouldn't like it, but I think they'd totally understand why DeAndre Hopkins would be in the red zone, instead of them, even if they
Right.
didn't like it. I
No,
don't think they'd
100%.
have much to say.
For
Now,
sure.
now a guy who's not even like, I don't think he even has an ADP unless you're like in a league that drafts like 50 players, okay? And that's Damien Martinez right now. Like, I can't even find him on like a 400 player ADP right now.
Sure.
But the Seattle Seahawk running back, he's slated by some draft, by some depth charts right now is like the fourth guy on the depth chart, fighting with George Holani for that final spot if they have that final spot.
McIntosh the third.
McIntosh
right?
is the third. But,
Cool.
but Walker's, Kenneth Walker still a little, he's a little banged up right now. You've got Charbonnet, you know what he can do. But in a Clint Kubiak offense, an offense where Damien Martinez goes, this is the perfect offense for me. Because he kind of played in that offense at Oregon State.
Yep.
I think the writing on the wall for me is he's going to have an active spot on that roster, and he's going to be beating Kenny McIntosh for it. What say you?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the big thing is going into 26, what's the backfield look like? I think there's a low percentage chance they bring back Kenneth Walker. I think he's going to be asking for too much he hasn't really given them the durability it takes to be, a high ticket back. And I think that's the difficult thing. Unless he can play 17, 18 this year, right? He can play the whole year without injury and handle bulk of touches. There's a chance next year you're looking at 2026, and it's Charbonnet and Martinez.
Yeah.
And it's a close to even split. Like that could very well be in the cards. I think Martinez, you're right. This is a great offense for him. Similar to what he ran at Oregon State when he was uber productive. He was really productive at Miami, but that was obviously a very pass first offense with a very bad defense that needed to come from behind a lot. So I don't think we got to see ultimately what Damien Martinez can do in more of a pro style type of run game. But yeah, I think he'll be definitely active, but I also think if Walker gets hurt, he'll be productive because I think McIntosh offers you kind of like a lesser version of Rachaad White.
Yeah.
Right? You're
Yeah.
good in passing downs, good in pass pro, isn't going to kill you as a tertiary rusher, but isn't going to elevate your offense. But yeah, I think there's definitely a path for Martinez to be productive this year and in years beyond.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I think that Martinez is a better receiver than what the number of catches he's had in the box score, mainly because in the offense that he played in, he was always the guy that was basically the distraction in play action with wide zone and toss fakes, running to the outside. But when you saw him at Miami, you could see that he could catch. And yeah, I think that we could wind up seeing a situation. The worst case scenario would be that somehow Breece Hall escapes New York and winds up in Seattle.
Yeah.
And then, Martinez is the third back, or they want to roll with a different club in the bag and keep McIntosh, and Walker winds up in that Jets mess as a player who asked for more than he should have, and and winds up with a team that's willing to pay it, but maybe not.
Right.
So yeah, that's going to be tough. And as much as I like Walker, I would hate to see him in that kind of situation. So
yeah, for sure.
We'll see. All right, a couple more left. You mentioned Rachaad White. So Rachaad White this year or Sean Tucker?
Tucker, I think he's one of those backs where whenever you watch him, you're like, he should be getting more work than he's currently getting. For me, I think Tucker has a chance to stick around the league for a while. Same with Rashod White, but obviously very different. I think White is simply not a great rusher. Doesn't offer you much in terms of being an elevator in the run game. White's more of your pass protector, going to work on passing downs, good receiver. But Tucker offers you legitimate home run capability as a runner, right? And coming out of Syracuse too, like if it wasn't for the health concerns, I think he would have been drafted in the second, third round. Like he was, in my opinion, that talented of a back, very linear driven, similar stylistically to a Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
Obviously way lesser of a version of that in terms of archetype, but in that same archetype of where, you could look up and it's an 85-yard touchdown. Like he's that talented in terms of his explosive capabilities, but just was very sparingly used because of Bucky Irvin's ascension into being one of the better backs in the league. But yeah, I would say definitely Sean Tucker. I think he has a future and can stick around in the league. And I think he goes somewhere else after his tenure with the Buccaneers is over and can be a really productive runner in the right system.
Yeah, I mean, I think the drum beats are there. That's what we were referring to earlier in the show, because I think it was at the Combine where asked about him, Jason Lick, the GM, said, in my mind, he's a legitimate NFL starter talent. That I see him as a future starter. And then Todd Bowles said, we need to get him on the field more. And then Rachaad White's been on social media saying, this is my last year in Tampa.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really funny because I think I tweeted like a while ago. I'm like, Tucker needs to play over White, and everybody's like, no, like White's just not that good.
No.
But it's okay. Like he doesn't need to be for the role he plays because he's so safe in pass protection.
Right.
And he might be the best pass protecting back in the league. Like he's in the top 3 in that category, and that's going to keep him with a job forever.
And he can catch.
Yeah, he can. He's a safe receiver out of the backfield. He's going to have a role for a very long time, but he's just not the explosive rusher that Tucker and Irving are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I love a world where it's the Tucker and Irving show.
Yeah.
And we're getting a really cool Thunder Lightning type deal.
And but, I think we may get there because, I mean, I think if Rachaad White's like, this is my last year here, he sees the writing on the wall. He knows what's probably going to happen. And he's probably like, he's probably resigned to the idea that he may lose time. He may lose playing time. And it's funny how fans and analysts are, because it was just like 3-4 years ago that fans were calling for Leonard Fournette to get off the field for Rachaad White. And you're looking at Rachaad White and going, yeah, he's not that great of a decision maker between the tackles. He likes to bounce a lot outside. He won't take on dudes the way he needs to. And then you see him run a little bit tougher and a little bit better in year 2. And I didn't think he was as bad as maybe denigrated last year, just because people were rooting for Irving to get more touches. I mean, White got the we know it's coming to you type of touches that Nick Chubb gets, he got more of those. And so, yeah, you're not going to, you're not maybe going to produce as well as the guy who's getting the touches when the defense doesn't expect it as often or isn't playing personnel like that. So, yeah, but I'm with you on Tucker. Good cutback runner, decent pass catcher, great home run ability. I think he's the best blend of all 3 backs. He's the best blend of the other 2 backs in the backfield. So yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, he's the must-have player in my drafts in the late rounds. Like
Love
that's
it.
the one guy. All right. So what about this one? This is an interesting one to just end it with. I posed this to my other co-host Bob Harris in our show Feel It or Fuck It earlier in the week, and I said Tyler Lockett or Calvin Ridley, and I think the most obvious answer for most people is Ridley, and he ultimately went Ridley. But I wonder if you see that as a legitimate either or you're like, I like Lockett and what he was, but no, it's still just Ridley, and Lockett is just hoping to get a secondary role here.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what role Lockett plays. Is he going to be Tyler Lockett in the slot where he's uber productive? Or is he going to be bumped outside and try to make defenses pay down the field? Obviously, he's lost a little bit. He's getting older. But for me, I think Ridley has a legitimate chance at a 1,200-yard year.
Okay.
Like, I think that's the big thing. I think he's going to be the number one in that offense. But I'll be honest with you, I think the number one of the future is not even on that roster.
Nah.
So I think one of the interesting ones is it Xavier Restrepo or Tyler Lockett?
Ooh.
I think that's interesting because I could very well see Restrepo winning the slot role. Really, it's between him. I think Tyler Boyd is still there, right?
I think so.
And then it's Tyler Lockett, depending on what role Lockett plays. But I think, if the rapport between Ward and Restrepo trickles into training camp and he keeps garnering more buzz, I think there's a legitimate chance that by mid-year, Restrepo's a starter. But again, this is a wide open offense in terms of who's going to be the guy in 26. This Titans team's not going to be very good. Obviously, the number one overall pick, not very good this year in 25. But I think in 26, you get a couple weapons around Ward, that offense could take a huge step forward. But I'll be interested to see, are any of the starting receivers on that current roster? I think your best bet's Restrepo potentially. Just because I think Ridley's getting up there in age, so is Lockett. Tyler Boyd's, nothing but a tertiary option or a fourth guy. And Chinokonko's a good after catch tight end, but all you have is him and Gunnar Helm. Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, I think it's more who do you take, Restrepo or take the old guy and Lockett?
That's a fun, spicy take in a way, but a reasonable one for sure. I think the argument that I'd like to make for Lockett, we'll see if it pans out. And a lot of this is narrative based. So we've talked about watching out for narratives, especially when players supply their own narratives as reasons to sell themselves for why they're still viable as they head into camp. But the first thing is that, Lockett said, look, new offense in Seattle, there's a lot of politics. They wanted to get DK the ball. They wanted to make Jackson Smith and Jigba their next it guy, so I had to take a back seat for the better of the team. Okay, fine. Well, maybe that's true. There's probably some reasons, like you mentioned, why that might be true, and that he left out. Like maybe he's a little bit of a step slower. The other end of the spectrum, though, is DK Metcalf did say, in an unrelated matter, like when he got traded to the Steelers, he said, listen, you want to know the difference between the offense I was in and why I'm gone? It's because Ryan Grubb's offense, before each game, me and Tyler Lockett for years would scout the opposing defenses. And we would send emails with a packet of things where we said, here's the position, here's the alignments that corners and safeties are playing against us. Here's what's being called when they're doing that or against other teams. Here's how we can take advantage of it. And Pete Carroll's regime would go, thank you, and implement solutions that were easy. Apparently, after about 3 games of doing this with Ryan Grubb, they just gave up and stopped expecting anything because they would just call the same vanilla play that had no solution when they could see the solution easily in sight. And the coaching staff was just like, thanks, and did nothing with it. So you could see how maybe a guy like Lockett, especially, who's versatile, who's a good route runner, who has a good knowledge of the game, is nicely saying, it wasn't saying what Metcalf was saying, but like basically they were like, we had a lot more meat on the bone than what they were willing to leverage. And especially with a guy like Lockett. So if that's true, and he can be the coach on the field with Cam Ward, maybe there's a shot that he can be an 800 to 1,000-yard receiver. And if Calvin Ridley plays like Calvin Ridley has played recently, he could threaten Calvin Ridley for the lead in either receptions and yardage. But I think that Ridley is easily the top guy on paper. But that's the angle that I would take with that if I were going to argue for Lockett in that regard.
Right.
So
yeah, for sure. I love that.
yeah. Well, listen, we love being able to do this show with you guys. I certainly love being able to hear Brandon's takes with what we do. You can find him at Angelo Analysis. He does terrific work there. You can subscribe to his site. You should subscribe to his site and find the work that he does there, the film breakdowns, the rankings, all the different work that you get for college and pro that's going to help your fantasy team. Definitely recommend it. You can find me at mattwaldman.com. I'll have my next update for the Dynasty rankings and projections will be in early August, first week of August. If you buy the rankings and projection service right now, the June update was out earlier in the month. I'll send you that while you wait so you can see what's there. And of course, there's the RSP pre-draft, post-draft that you can get, and it has rookie-only rankings, which I've had a pretty good track record with those, even though I don't update them throughout the year.
Sure.
I just kind of say, hey, this is what I'm looking at as a mix of short and long term, and I think that works out. So you can check that out. And, we love you and we appreciate you, and we'll talk with you in a few weeks.